And something continue, okay. Can you all hear me and see me?
Yes.
Okay. Let me just share my screen to my PowerPoint. And where does it share? Do you see that or not?
Not yet, Lee.
No.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Let me go back to the Zoom. Sorry about that. I thought I pressed share screen. Just host. Oh, you have to allow me to share. Host disabled participant screen sharing. So who's the host? You need to allow me to share. Okay.
You are now co-host. My mistake there.
Okay, let me try again. Okay, this is my screen. That's not my screen. How do I do that? Okay, share. Now do you see my screen?
We do indeed.
Yes.
Okay, here we go. Yes, I was talking about the music. I think this we have to understand it's not something that you always can take it for granted, because it's a privilege. As I've grown up in China during the 26 years, most of the time we couldn't listen to these non-Chinese music, non-revolutionary Chinese music. For a very short period of time in late 1970s, these music was allowed, but we were not allowed to use the names. We have to use numbers like C minus, opus 31, that kind of thing. We were not allowed to name the composer, not allowed to name the title of the music for only a year of the time. Then that was banned again. So we listened to the music secretly. One of my favorite was Tchaikovsky's Symphony No. 6, Pathétique. And we have homemade earphones, and we have kind of a homemade shortwave radios that we could listen to something outside, and close all the windows and the doors and cover ourselves with blankets. That's how we listen to these music. So please appreciate your freedom to that you can listen to any music of your choice. That's not guaranteed. Okay, now I'm going to my talk. First of all, aloha. I'm in Hawaii. That's how we greet people. Let me see how I can change my slide. That's another challenge right now. Does anybody know how I can change my slide? Okay, got it. Today, I'm going to share with you a story of my life, why I'm not ticklish. It sounds funny, but it's not a funny story. First of all, I am made in China, so a little low in quality in the terms of health-wise, nutrition-wise. We didn't have much when I was growing up. So this is 1956, my parents got married. Both of my parents came from the top 1% of the society, the families. They're educated, they're entrepreneurs, they're capitalists. And seated in a sofa is my great grandmother. She had bounded feet, very tiny little feet. And she gave birth to 9 children. And behind her, on the right, was my grandmother. Behind my grandmother, that's my great grandmother's daughter. And that was my grandfather. And in the middle was my uncle. To the left was my father. And then in the light dress was my mother. This picture was taken in their home in the then living room. Right after this picture was taken, this room was taken away by the government, no longer available for my family, because the Communist Party, they are there for the people to make everybody equal. That's their slogan, that's their mission. So equal, by their definition, is equal share of the outcome of the product and everything else, not equal opportunity. So at that time in Shanghai, per person, you only should have 2 square meters of spaces. If your living spaces is more than that, the government will take it away, regardless it's your private home or your rented home, whatever. So that time, my uncle and my father went to college, so they don't live at home much anymore. So for 3 people, they have, that was a French style single family home with a big front yard and backyard and living room, dining room, 2 bedrooms and 1.5 bath. That was too much. So the government moved in a family of 6, 4 children and parents, and took half of the house. And later on, about 10 years later, and another 3 family moved in to that place. So that was a very memorable picture, not only because of the people in there, also because of the room. And I was born in 1958 in Tianjin, China. That's the 3rd largest city in China during that time. The first one, the Beijing, then Shanghai, and Tianjin. Tianjin is a port city, 100 miles south of Beijing, very important industrial city. And my mother went to Tianjin to study in universities. Then after graduated from university, the government make her stay at the same university, became a professor there. In China, until just recent years, nobody get to choose what job you want to have or where you can live. So the government assigned everything. So my mother was assigned to stay at the university, and my father graduated from medical school in Shanghai because he married my mother, so he was allowed to move to Tianjin to be with my mother that time. So let me tell you something about 1958. That's the time from 1958 to 1962 in China, we call the Great Leap Forward, which means China want to leap forward so fast to surpass United States and Great Britain by the amount of the production of steel. Mao Zedong believed if you make a lot of steels, more tons than United States or Great Britain, then you are world power, you're number 1 in the world. So that from that idiot kind of thinking, and the whole country stopped everything and together start to make steels. So because of that, all the means of productions stopped or destroyed. There's no food, no production other than steels, and everything else was destroyed. Chairs and tables, wood products were burned to make steels, and ready-made steel product like wok, pots and pans, doorknobs were taken away to melt it. Then buy the chairs and tables and counted as production of steels. So yeah, that's why I say we were poorly made in China. My brother never really had a real milk when he was born in late 1958. The vision of the government and the poster, now you see that a lot of the same poster in North Korea, exactly the same. That's the government's vision or propaganda, but the reality was totally opposite. The equality the government promised people, the result become everybody equally poor. And that's the top picture was me and my little brother. We had no table, so the big chairs are our table. And the thing behind the chair was the bed. We get to, the government gave us 2-room living quarters. It was a single family home again, but 3 families, 15 people lived there, but later on got more people. We all share 1 bathroom, all 15 people, not bathroom, just a toilet. We don't have bathrooms. And no shower, we just use a bucket to in our own room to bathe. Then we share the kitchen. That's how we lived. Then following the Great Leap Forward was 3 years of famine. The Chinese today still officially, they call it 3 years of natural disaster, but we call it 3 years of famine or starvation because there's no food, nothing. And I remembered to identify all kinds of edible grass on the ground. And even today, we still do that. We say, oh, this is edible, let's get it and cook with it. And the tree barks, and they even have classes, teach people how to get the bark off the tree and then eat them. Even ashes in the burning pot in the temples, you know, in temple people burn incense. The incense ashes were all eaten at that time. Of course, all the temples were closed, and everything edible, we ate it. And nothing really is food. You just fill your stomach. And I remember seeing people were too hungry and too weak and laying on the sidewalk. I don't know, either waiting to die or already dead. And a lot of people were swollen because of extreme starvation. And that time, the crime of theft become a very increased a lot, especially in the countryside among kids, because people are so hungry. And also the government collect every available food and grain to their warehouses, and they equally distribute to other people, to the villages, sometimes just a handful per month, per people, per person, that kind of thing. So people are starved, and kids sometimes didn't know any better, so they just go to the fields and dug up a root, left it there, or take a handful of grain from the government warehouses, and then they were all punished severely. And the most common way of punishing people is to bury them alive, because they don't have, you know, bullets are not very common. And so bury people alive, especially they ask family member to bury other family member alive. I remember when I was little listening, hearing all these stories, how when the soil got to your neck, your lung kind of got pressed, you cannot breathe anymore. So your head above the ground and you choke to death. And this is the data telling the poverty level around the world. during the time I was a little kid, China was the most impoverished country in the world, far worse than the African countries. And the average intake of calorie in the entire China was lower than the average calorie intake in Auschwitz in the Jewish camp. That was the reality. And until today, my shrink told me I have extreme poverty syndrome because I have a lot of food in storage in my house. I don't know why. And sometimes they're bad. They got bugs. I still eat them. And I never throw away any food. And my daughter told me, Mom, you don't have to be that way. I said, I don't know why. So my shrink told me that's called extreme poverty syndrome. I still have it. I'm trying to overcome it. And later on, after the Great Famine, China got better, but still very in a great shortage of every kind of daily necessities. We have coupons for every single things, from of course food, grains, oil, meat, vegetables, to cotton, to shoes, to haircut, to bath, shower coupons. You don't get to shower every day, once a month per person, haircut, and even to the ladies' monthly napkins are rationed, and the matches, cigarettes, sugar, every single thing you can think of is rationed. And even with those coupons, you don't usually get to buy them. That's the fight. People stay in line and to get what a potato or some cabbage. So then after, I think starting 1965 was the best year of China. Everything got better because just like in Russia, they have temporary measure of allowing farmers to farm their own land with their own decision just for 1 year, and life got better. And then immediately the Mao Zedong and the Communist Party said we have to, people are enjoying the food and clothing too much. That's not politically correct. We have to do something about that. So in 1966, the Cultural Revolution began. For 10 years, this great Cultural Revolution is to brainwash everybody and make everybody think as one person and do everything according to the party needs and according to what Mao wants everybody to do. So 1968, I was actually, when the Cultural Revolution started, 1966, I was 8 years old. I was just entering first grade in elementary school. My brother was not in school yet. And we had about a few months of normalcy of classes, and then started to join the revolution, beat up the teachers and principals, and stop reading books, but Mao's books, and participating in it. And then 1967, all schools closed because my school as part of the university was built for the university faculties. So it was closed. Elementary school, high school also closed alongside with the universities. In entire China, all university closed. The students all became Red Guards to do revolutionary works, and basically like civil war and physical and non-physical civil war. And so my brother and I, we had nothing else to do, just basically raised ourselves on the street. And my father was imprisoned. And my great-grandmother, you saw earlier, that by then she was 88 years old with bounded feet and never worked a day in her life because she was married well and from a very wealthy family. And then the Red Guard forced her to go outside to weed along. And soon after that she died. And the way the Red Guard treat their enemy, which is they divided the society into two groups, red and black. My family was black, so I grew up as a black kid. I don't know, the red, I think is you are in 8 generations in your family, nobody's educated. You never owned any property in land or shops. You never had any much of money, and then you're red. For us, we are educated. We own land. We have factories. We have stocks, and we have banks and everything. So we're definitely black. At the beginning, there were 5 kind of blacks: landowner, rich people, anti-communist people. Number 3, number 4 is bad people. That was the funniest. Nobody knows what makes you a bad person. So until today, we still say, oh, you're number 4 because you're bad, but you don't know how you're bad. And then number 5 is right wing. And right wing means you don't think like a communist. So then later expanded to 9 categories: educated and foreign educated, speak foreign language, and that kind of thing. And so when the Red Guard, called Red Guard because they're red, one way they treat the black people is publicly humiliation, because the Chinese people and Chinese culture is face is very important, dignity. So the Red Guard want to do everything possible to take your dignity away, to shame you. So they take you to the street and put a big board with your name and crime on it. If you can read character, you can see those. This guy is black, and that the bottom line 3 character was his name. And usually they try to make the board really heavy like plywood, and a very thin metal wire on your neck. So really painful. And because the board is heavy, so you have to bend lower. And then the other way is to cut your hair. They call it yin yang style. They shave up one side, the other side, they randomly cut it. And now sometimes I see people have this kind of haircut as fashion, but it was horrible at that time. Then my mother got, her hair was cut that way by her students at the university. Another way, they call it jet propelled position. 2 people will hold your arm behind you. The higher they raise your arms behind you, the lower you'll bend down and your head will be lower. So bowing down in Chinese culture is kind of a humiliating gesture. In the good way, it's humble, but in the bad way, it's very humiliating. So they want you to bow down to the communists, to the red. And they get that kind of treatment every day, both my father and mother. And my father, the first thing he did when he knew he's going to be in prison, he shaved up his head, because otherwise they will pull his hair and pound onto the wall on the ground. So these are some pictures. You can see they put you on top of a chair or a bench. My grandfather was forced to kneel down on the bench for hours, and every time his knee gave away or too painful, he moved, they just beat him with a belt. And my grandfather also died pretty young because of these tortures. And one picture is on the left top, because the board was so heavy, then the person couldn't even stand up. And another way to read these signs is, if your name has a cross on there, means you're worse than the name without a cross. And if your name with a cross was black, you're still okay. If it's red, means you're on your way to execution ground, you'll be shot. And if your name, the characters written upright, you're still kind of okay. If your name, your character is upside down, then you're in deeper trouble. So the top above your name is all your crimes listed. And then on the right side, you can see some executed people and mass grave and like that. So here comes my story, why I'm not ticklish. When the Cultural Revolution began with this called big character posters, started on the campus of Beijing University, and Mao loved it. So I have to remind everybody, I didn't mention that actually, during 1958, actually starting 1955, the communist government encouraged people to write these posters or letters to the government to critique the government, to make things, to improve the management of the government. And some people did. Immediately they were labeled right-wing and sent to labor camps. A lot of them were killed. So this time, when somebody wrote the big letter, big character posters, Mao loved it. Everything Mao loved it became okay, not only okay, everybody have to do it. One fun side story was one time somebody, a president from African country, I don't remember whom, gave Mao 2 mangoes. Mao have never seen mangoes. So Mao said, oh, how can I enjoy this all by myself? I'm going to share that with the workers in the city. And Mao gave the 2 mangoes to the workers. Workers said, oh, those are so sacred. How can we dare to eat Mao's mango? So they took the mango, marched on the street for days. Of course, mango got rotten, so they made plastic mangoes. The entire China was marching and dancing with mangoes for months. And they even shipped the mango, pretend to ship the mango from Beijing to another city, and thousands of people will go to the train station to welcome the mango, and chanting and dancing and to the mango. So that's how sacred Mao's Mao and everything he touched, everything he said became. So the big posters overnight, it was everywhere, and they get covered up, and other posters posted in minutes of time. So I remember all the posters will say, please preserve for 8 hours, please preserve for 2 hours, whatever. So these posters was everywhere. And for me, as I mentioned, my school closed. I had 1 year of education, actually half a year of education. I could read a little bit because we didn't, they didn't teach us in daycare center or kindergarten. We only get to learn to read and write in elementary school. So I knew some words. So every day without school, without parents, I would take my brother to walk around to read posters, because we live on campus. They have even more posters. Every inch of the place they can paste it, their posters. So for 2 reasons. One reason is I need to know what kind of new crime they put upon my mother, because that's where I got information instantly. I will look for her name, see if her name is written upright or tilted or upside down. I want to see if her name had a cross on it, if it was black or red. And also I want to see what kind of crime what kind of new evidence, they call it, they discover. For example, her grandfather was really important historical figure, was not favored by the communists, or one of her students said, accused her of abuse because he couldn't pronounce things very well. My mother suggests she will see a oral doctor about his tongue, and then he claimed my mother would torture him. And so these evidence came out every day. So I went to read them to find out more information. And then one time I even find out they realized my father was a spouse of my mother, and my father's family had some things that communists didn't like, and was posted there. Another reason was I was so afraid of being illiterate. So I want to practice reading. So I went out there every day to read. And also another thing we did, there's a wall, short wall next to our house. My brother and I will sit on the wall and watching this big street on the other side. It was outside the campus. The main street, that's where they truck the people to the execution ground. So every day we will count how many trucks, how many people on the trucks, and that was amusement for us. And the picture was taken before the Cultural Revolution, so we had this smile on, and and also another practice was for the Cultural Revolution is to eliminate all the cultures, non-revolutionary or not the favored by Mao or CCP or not the Chinese. So first of all, at the time they raided all the churches, temples, mosques, and synagogues, and all the statues and monuments were destroyed. And then they marched to private homes, to raid homes, to see what people have in their house are not good, not supposed to be there. All the antiques were destroyed. Actually, some people, especially the Red Guards, they knew the value of the antique, so they didn't dare to destroy, but would take away from you. And in Beijing alone, the antiques, they took away from private homes. Later on in 1999 to 1973, for all these years, they had an exhibition of these things. That's the only time people get to learn about Chinese culture and art through the confiscated artifacts. They didn't have a place to put it anymore, too many. I think somebody calculated all the things they confiscated, all the cash and gold they confiscated from private homes, add together is greater than the restitution from wars, entire world. That much they took away from people. And they came to our house, of course, and they made my brother and I watch because my parents were not home. They found my parents have Western clothes. So they took it out, my mom's dresses. I remember they asked me to find the scissors for them and they shredded them. And my father have 8 pairs of shoes. That's not allowed, even one person only allowed to have 1 pair of shoes. How dare you have more than 1 pair of shoes? And they all look nice, nice looking Western style shoes. So they piled it up, torched it, and then they found our photo albums. And they pointed to me and my brother, say, look, those people, they dress so nicely, Western clothes, and they have a smile on their face. How evil. That's evidence they hate, they love the old society, they hate the new society because they had good life. So they burn all the photos. Until today, my mother still don't care about taking pictures because all the good memories, all the pictures were destroyed. We try really hard to family get together. Some family had the better luck. They not everything was taken away from them. So we found a few pictures of my parents when they were little and few pictures of me when I was little and some pictures of my ancestors. And then our dishes were wrong because we have a set of Western food dishes. We ate Western food and was flat. it's not a Chinese noodle bowl. So was all crashed. And jewelries, of course, my mother didn't have much. My grandmother and my great-grandmother, of course, they had jewelries. And they say, my grandmother used to tell me, oh, we have real pearls, real diamonds, not your kind of plastic, you know. And I said, what happened to them? She said, we just, from our balcony, we just threw it away. Because if we hide it, when the Red Guard comes, they find out we're hiding things, we're in more trouble because nobody dare to hide things from the Red Guards. So we just threw them away. And later on, when I was having a job, and sometimes I see some nice jewelry I bought for my grandma or my mother, they laugh at me. They say, we have so much better ones. We don't care. We don't want to wear jewelries. And, you know, they still have the trauma from those things. And so when Red Guard went to that time my aunt and my maternal grandfather was living together, they went to that house to raid it and took everything away. They even beat my grandfather, and he became blind for a short time, and a few days, or I don't remember, a few weeks, because they beat him too much. And all my families, every family got raided like that. So we constantly live in fears, and we don't know what's going to happen every minute. So my brother and I, we were usually play in front of our house, this little yard with some trees. And there they come. One day we heard chanting. Usually they, when they publicly humiliating those professors or whatever Black people, is not only they have a board on their neck, also they have a cone head on top of their head, and they have a gun in their hand. They were hitting the gun and chanting, I'm so and so, my crime is this, I'm the enemy of the people, and march on the street daily. So one day I heard this chanting getting closer and closer. I said, uh-oh, must be my mother. So there came my mother with a crazy hairstyle, with a big cone on her head and big board on her neck, and chanting. And this big group of her students, the Red Guards, following her and pushing her and towards our house. What they wanted to do was to make my brother and I tell on my mother. So when they found us and they surrounded us, and my mother stood there, my brother and I in front of her, and they asked us, they said, tell us what your mother taught you that's anti-communist, anti-Mao. There's nothing. My mother never taught us that. And also, for some reason, my brother and I, we never sided with the Red Guard. Most people did, even family members. We always trusted my parents and family. So we didn't say anything. We had nothing to say. I was holding my brother's hand. I was 9, my brother was 8, and just stood there. And then they start to beat my mother in front of us. Say, look, this is evidence. You taught your children to refuse the order of the Red Guards. And they beat her right in front of us. And so that was our daily life. And then usually my mother, during the work hours, she was forced to be at the workplace and being tortured and confessing and brainwashing, and she get to come home for dinner. After dinner, she had to go back. So usually after dinner, when my mother leaves, she said, you two will stay in the house, in the rooms, and turn off the light, don't make noise, and she will put a padlock on the door, pretend there's nobody in the house. Therefore, if somebody came to harass us, we will be safe. So sure, one day it happened. And the Red Guard came and they found the padlock on the door. And they were so angry. There's nobody's home. So they were surrounded the house, start putting big posters on the door, on the window, cover the entire outside exterior of the house with the false accusations of my parents. And they chanted and shouted for a long time until they're tired and they left. And my brother and I were in the house, in the rooms, couldn't dare to breathe. And if they discover we're inside, pretend to be not home, we're in bigger trouble. And they left. And when my mother came home, she couldn't even come into the house because it was all covered by the posters. You don't dare to tear the poster down. That would be the crime, destroying Red Guard's glorious things. So carefully cut a little bit a crack, not destroying any words, and she finally came to the house. So every day we were in the room in the dark like that, and we didn't have toys. We have nothing to play. Of course, there's no music, there's no games, and so we were just sitting on the bed. And one day we start tickling each other, and then we giggle. And I suddenly realized, no, we cannot make noise. Shh, okay. And then we said, okay, I told my brother, okay, let's do this from now on. Let's not be ticklish. And my brother agreed, okay, it's too dangerous to be ticklish. So for some reason, right after that moment, both of us are not ticklish anymore. Until today, I'm not ticklish, my brother is not ticklish. And some people say we're no fun because we're not ticklish, but that's how we became not ticklish, because the fear of making any noise. So in 1969, my father was released from prison because too many people are imprisoned down in a prison and spaces. My father told me when he was in prison, each prisoner get the space of length of a chopstick. So people have to lay on the side, touching each other, just like sardine in a can. And in the middle of the night, somebody was called turn. So everybody turned to sleep on the other side. That was so crowded and with hard labor. So his crime was not severe enough. So they released him. But our whole family have to move away. And we were banished to a remote village, very primitive, thousands of miles away in the border with Vietnam, that area in the mountains. The lifestyle there was like at least 1,000 years ago, kind of so primitive, with no running water, no toilet, no electricity. We didn't even have farm animal. That's how we till the land. I was only 11 years old. I was holding the plow like that in the mud every day. We supposed to be going to school, but our school is farm work, carry loads of things like that, making terraces and carrying water. Another thing about terraces, you might see it was a beautiful picture of sceneries and very beautiful, but I hate it because how we made it, how we carry water onto it, how we plant, how we harvest and carry things down, that was just horrifying hard labor. And but my father, our family was one of the 5 families sent there to that village together. All 5 families are medical personnel. My father's surgeon, there's 1 internal doctor, 1 dentist, 1 eye doctor, and 1 nurse. And so our 5 families together, we built a clinic. We still serve the people, and in the big way. We did everything. And I have, maybe next time I get to talk, I will tell you the stories how that, but long story short, my father became very, very famous because he saves hundreds of lives. And then, so we were there for only 4 years, and we got promoted to a small city near that village, a steel mill. My father became a doctor in the clinic in the steel mill. My mother got a better job as in the research department. Before that, in the countryside, my mother, the English professor, was my father's helper when he was doing surgery. Because there's nobody help my father do surgery. My mother, without any training, became helper for my father in surgery rooms. And my brother and I, we make equipments, gauzes and cotton balls and swabs. And we also tend the pharmacy. Yeah, remember I was only 11, my brother was 9. And we did that and went to the mountain, collect herbs, and to treat the patients because we didn't have enough things. And then my father used acupuncture for anesthesia and that kind of thing. And then even that's the short period of time I had some formal education like a math class or chemistry or physics. But other than these 3 classes, everything else was mouse book, propaganda, and also a lot of work. So I learned how to drive tractor and work in the steel mill, making parts, things like that. And then 1976, the Cultural Revolution officially ended. Actually, I say that means I believe Cultural Revolution never ended. Today, it's still going on. The way of controlling and the way of greenwashing in China actually expanded to outside of China. As many of you, if you have better imagination, you can see why I say that. But anyways, 1976, Mao died and Cultural Revolution ended. 1978, universities reopened after being closed for 10 years. So we are all qualified to take the examination to enter university in 1 year, all 10 years graduates. And I've never studied so hard. Remember, I never had any much of a formal education. So basically I studied on my own. And also, fortunately, among the exiled people, they were my neighbors. They were all highly educated people. So I just went to uncle's house and auntie's house and I learned as much I could. They taught me without books from their knowledge. So I passed the exam and got into university because that's the only way, the first time I felt like I can have little control of my life, even though we don't get to choose the university or the major. I wanted to study English and they sent me to study Japanese because the countries need. And but I still get to use my own effort to change my path of my life. So I got into university. My brother couldn't study that hard and he didn't even have that much education. So he never was able to pass the exam. Then I studied Japanese and then I got a job. The government assigned me a job in Beijing. And after I graduated, and then after I worked for a year, I got the opportunity to come to the United States for graduate school. I went to University of Minnesota. I got my master's degree there, first master's degree there. And eventually, my brother, my father and mother, they all left China before me because I was in university. My father was invited by University of Minnesota to do heart transplant research. My mother was invited by University of Kansas to teach Chinese. And so my mother helped my brother to leave China because he has no life in China. So that's how we all came out. And then when I came out, my father and mother have to go back. That time, United States wouldn't not allowed the entire family from China come to United States together. So in order for me to come to United States, my parents have to go back. So I came then later on when they relaxed the policy, my parents came back again. So now all four of us live in United States. So thank you very much for listening to my story. And I hope you get some walk away.
Well, Lee Schoolland, thank you so much for that talk of testimony. That's, I think, the best way to describe it. We haven't talked about this, but I'm Jewish, so I've, of course, heard many survivors talk about their experience in World War II. But as a matter of fact, I've never heard a Chinese person talk about their life under the Cultural Revolution and Mao Zedong. So if you have some questions, I'm going to ask you please to send them into the chat room, and I will try and review them. I'd hope to be able to review them beforehand. But so Lee, there's one that comes from really us as those involved in the arts. So I know a number of composers that I'll also post in chat who grew up under the Cultural Revolution. I'm thinking of people like Bright Sheng in this country, who teaches at the University of Michigan, and Chen Yi and her husband Chao Long, who were very gifted musicians who were, like you and your family, sent out to the countryside for many years and not allowed to practice their art. What was life like for musicians, composers, and visual artists before the Cultural Revolution? I think we know that what happened to them, as I've just stated, during, but what was their position in society before the Cultural Revolution?
Okay, that's a very good question. It happened in my family. There's quite a few musicians, especially pianists. And before the Cultural Revolution, they were concert pianists, piano teachers, performers, and it's normal, just like now, like in the United States, but they have very limited choices. They can practice the skills with Western, composers things, but when they perform, most of the time was all Chinese music or approved Chinese music, not just any kind of Chinese music. That because before cultural, I'm talking about from 1949 when communists took over China. Before that, my parents would tell me, or my grandparents would tell me, they lived in Shanghai and Tianjin. It was like in the United States, like today. They have Hollywood movies, they have pops, they have concerts, they have theaters and movies and everything. But after 49, it's also getting less and less and less until none. During the Cultural Revolution, only 8 pieces of performing art were allowed, and by Mao's wife, the first lady. Then the 8 pieces lasted for 10 years. Everybody learned to sing these things. They were in mostly Peking opera form, and then became Cantonese opera. And one ballet, they have guns and shooting like pops. One ballet, and the other 7 were all, I think, Peking opera. We all know how to sing that because that's the only thing we were allowed to sing. And Western instruments were banned, and they all changed to Chinese instrument, or the non-Chinese is accordions, because they're from Russia mostly. So all my aunts, they were pianists, and start playing accordions, and then they learn Chinese instrument, and some are still secretly use piano, but they have to be very clever. They only play revolutionary songs, and they for I think late 70s, they were able to get students from the elitists, from the government officials' children, and then they, if they were the students, and the teachers were safe. And now they're back to normal, but some people during that time secretly still keep practicing, or they use other instruments to keep their love for music until the Western instrument was allowed again. Yeah.
And Lee, are you able to travel back and forth to China now? Do you see other family members who survived the revolution and or friends from that time?
Yes, actually, then I love you when you use survivor, because I refuse to be called a victim. I'm a survivor. I'm not a victim. And yes, after I left China, I didn't want to go back. I finally put everything behind. So the first time I went back was after I left for 11 years. I went back because my maternal grandfather passed away, so I went back. But recent years, I've been back a lot. My grandmother, my father's mother, and she used to come to visit us every other year and live with us. And then at her 90th birthday, 2000, I told her don't come again because it's too risky. If she fell or she gets sick in the United States, we cannot afford the medical bill. So I promised her I would go back to China to visit her. So after that, I use all my holidays as a teacher. I have breaks, and I went to China to visit her. And recent years, like in your introduction, I start to become full-time promoter of liberty. And at the beginning in early 1990s, I focused in Eastern Europe when the Berlin Wall fell, and for about 20 years. And then the Eastern Europe have many, many think tanks, and the people are doing the same thing. So I moved my field to China and Southeast Asia. So I start going back to China a lot. In the past 4 or 5 years, I was in China every other month, and organizing conferences and pushing for publications of the books. And until 2020, last year, I couldn't travel. So I stopped. 2019, we celebrated 10th year of my summer teaching with a group of world-renowned free market economists to China, to university to teach for a week, about 200 students, very focused session. 2019, we celebrated our 10th anniversary. And so last year it stopped. We're hoping this year will resume. But I just realized the CCP has their ears and eyes on Facebook and United States American social media. So some of my talks, like today's talk, will probably cause trouble for me to go back. But until that day comes, I am going to still try, and I'm not going to stop until they stop me. In China, there's a term called "you are invited to tea," means the secret police or the national security will invite you to tea to threaten you. I was invited to tea some years ago in China, but they couldn't intimidate me because after going through the Cultural Revolution, I'm really tough. And also I knew there's no rule of law. They were just threatening me by false claim they have authority over me, but I knew they don't. So I talked back, and finally they couldn't threaten me, and they start to plead with me. Oh, please, for your own safety, and don't do this, don't say that. I said, that's my problem, it's not your problem. That's I ended with them. So I'm very closely watched and monitored. And but like I said, until the day they blocked me from entry in China, I'm just still going to try. And also another leverage I have is my ancestors, the people, the same people who make me born as a Black kid, now became famous again in China. So if I disappeared, immediately a lot of people will know, because I have a lot of famous relatives. They're all gone, but still somehow make me kind of famous. So they're a little bit hesitated of causing me disappear. And also I'm quite careful, when I do things in China. I learn how to do it under the radar and things like that. Yeah.
So Lee, it sounds like you are fearless in your approach to your past and presenting it.
Yeah, just like the photo here.
That's right. One student has asked, are there many others like you who have had your experiences and who are now speaking out to keep this personal relationship to this history alive?
Yes and no. There's the most famous one is Jung Chen. Not Jung Chen, Jung Chang. She's the one who wrote the book with her husband. She wrote The Wild Swan, the unknown story. And she did a great job of let people know the evil of communism. But her background and mine are totally different. Her parents were revolutionaries. Her parents are the ones to persecute us before 1980s. And then they got into trouble during the Cultural Revolution a little bit. And so they're not Black family, they were red. That's one lady. Another lady called Lily Tong Williams. She ran for some office from Colorado, and she was very, very outspoken, and she got thousands of followers also. She also is she's very outspoken, but one time she and I shared a stage, and was very interesting because she said, I'm from the red family. I'm very red, and Lee's from Black family, but we all came to the same conclusion today. But she was totally brainwashed and true believer of communism until she came to this country and married her libertarian husband and really saw the truth. And she's very outspoken. And people like me, most people, very few people, some became Christian pastors after Tiananmen massacre, and most of them are from the red background, and some are communist doctrine professors, and then now they're Christian ministers. Most people from my background, they don't talk because they are afraid, or they say, why? There's no reason, because different from Nazi German and the Jews, because the whole world condemned Nazi Hitler. But the Chinese, the Communist Party, the same Communist Party, the same people who did all this evil and crime, they're still in power. They're still in power. So they're still controlling everybody's lives. So you can't talk. That's why I said Cultural Revolution never ended. You still cannot talk. So most people, for their own safety, they don't talk. None of the children knew. When I talk to young people in China, they say, we don't know. We never heard of it.
Mm.
Another lady who talked one time, she wrote Life and Death in Shanghai. She's had a similar background of our family. In fact, we are, her and my grandparents are really close friends, but her story, her background is also different because after communists took over, all our things were confiscated, all our life was destroyed, but theirs, because her husband worked for Zhao company, and secretly China, Zhou and Lai still want a relationship with Britain in secret. So they use him to go between because he worked for Shell Oil Company. So everything they had before the revolution was not touched. They have their house, they have their lifestyle, and so they love the communists. We didn't love communists from day one, but they loved the communists until in the middle of Cultural Revolution. Her daughter, one of the most violent Right Guard leader, got into trouble. Then they start to hate the communists.
Mm.
So yeah, I wish there's more people speaking out. Some very brave people in China, they're trying to speak out, but nobody translated their works into English or other languages.
Lee, this is absolutely fascinating. You presented materials that I've never heard of, and I'm sure many of our students and other guests, listeners have never heard. I think we're going to call it a day now, but this has been absolutely fascinating for us, and we so much appreciate your participating in our series on Voices of Culture. This is very important for us all to hear. So we thank you, and we will stay in touch, and we wish you the very best.
Aloha.
Aloha. Thank you. Bye-bye. Goodbye, everyone. We'll see you for our next Voice of Culture presentation, which you will hear about in the coming weeks. Thanks you for joining us. Have a good evening wherever you are.
Thank you so much.